G'day and welcome to The Pipeline. Today is August 13th, 2025. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. I'm joined, as usual, by Western Standard's senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan. And already back out of retirement is former Western Standard opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford.
Just couldn't stay away, Derek.
No, we had your retirement party on Friday. It's Wednesday, and you're back already, so... you just kind of had a long weekend and you're already out of retirement.
Well, it's going to be a long weekends, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just coming in to do Pipeline every now and then, so every week actually.
Yeah,
contribute to the odd article. So good to be back.
We couldn't let you go completely, so yeah, you're going to be back, still doing the Pipeline with us. Your show, Hannaford, is going to continue on, and your passionate pen will continue to grace our pages with your column at least once a week here.
Since we're talking about the passionate pen and the column, don't forget to check in with Hannaford tomorrow when we got Yaroslav Baran explaining some of the nonsense in Eastern Canada. So,
there's always a lot of material there.
Never fails.
Okay. Well, we're going to be talking about why the People's Party of Canada, note the last part of the name on that party, the People's Party of Canada, has endorsed the yes side in the expected upcoming, at some point, not yet set, Alberta referendum on independence. So why is a federal political party, ostensibly dedicated to Canada, supporting a referendum on a part of that country, leaving it? It's a head-scratcher. We'll talk about it. Everyone already knows, I'm sure, everyone listening, watching knows, about Nova Scotia's ban on walking in the forest or going fishing. But there's been a new development on that front. The ban on hiking and fishing, because fishing on the water might create a forest fire. That ban no longer applies as long as they ask first to First Nations, Natives. So now, I guess the ban on fishing and hiking in Nova Scotia is going to be racially based. We'll talk about it. But first, we're going to start with mass migration mania. The floodgates of mass migration have been thrown wide open in Canada over the last 5 years. We already had mass migration we already had mass migration for a long time before it. But then the gates were just thrown completely open 6 years ago. Mark Carney, as a part of his campaign to reassure the Canadian people, said that he is not Justin Trudeau, said he's going to bring those numbers down. We have a report from Blacklock's reporters on our pages today that the cap he has put in is... they're not really living up to the cap. The borders continue to be porous. Mm-hmm. Mass migration continues unabated, Nigel.
They don't even know how many people they've got in. You know, a lot of people have you just intuitively know if the immigration is taking off like a rocket. Well, what's the sense of that? There was a time when you had to be highly qualified to come to Canada at all. That's 50 years ago. 25 years ago, we've got a lot of family reunification. Again, you could see why. You could make the case. Somebody wants to bring members of their family in so they can enjoy the benefits they've been experiencing themselves in Canada. All of those things made sense, and around about 200,000 people a year would come in. Then it just took off, and I think after a lot of years, when it was 400,000 and 500,000 during the first years of Mr. Trudeau's reign, we hit 1 million new people in Canada, not 1 million new Canadians who'd all gone through the sausage machine, but just people here. They were either students on working visas or people brought in to work. And the numbers just shot up. And you think, well, why would they do that? The answer is that nothing else that Mr. Trudeau was doing economically was working, but having all these people coming in, finding a place to live, buying food, buying cars, buying gas, gave the false impression of a prosperous growth within Canada. But, of course, the downside of it, as we all know, hit the housing market first, the rental market, and people started asking questions. Now, Mr. Carney was asked a question during his campaign. He said, look, we've got to get a grip on this thing. But the story this morning is we haven't got a grip on it. Let's just read you what we said. The immigration levels in the first third of the year, this year, outpaced Prime Minister Mark Carney's promised cap on quotas. Figures released by the Department of Immigration for the first 120 days of this year indicate that we will exceed 400,000 immigrants in 2025. That's more than Mr. Carney promised. So the system is not working. And the why of it, I don't think it's changed. I think it gives the federal government the illusion of prosperity and busyness. They like that.
Cory, I partially agree with Nigel on the why, partially, but I think it's and we see this in Western countries everywhere. I think it's more than just trying to juice the overall gross national product, gross national product here. I think it's trying to stack the electorate because, the progressivist worldview is that so-called old stock Canadians are reactionary. They're not sufficiently progressive. They're racist, gun-owning, vaccine hesitant, except, add whatever epithets you want to it. I think it's in their view a way of also, in the long term, intentionally changing the demographic and therefore electoral makeup of the country. That's a bit more taboo to get into, but hell, or at least standard, we can say what we want here. I think it's both. I don't think it's just artificially juicing the GDP numbers. I think it's an intentional policy, intentioned and design to change the makeup of Canada.
No, I agree. It's both. I'm thinking this began more, though, as that juicing of the economy. It's a lazy way to do it. I mean, they only ever had one economic measure they could keep pointing to. Look how our GDP is growing.
Never GDP per capita.
But now GDP per capita, because your pie is growing, but the people eating it are outpacing the growth of the pie. Mm-hmm. But the political ramifications, absolutely. I mean, we look at a recent thing, too, where the government put out a big invitation when he's saying he's going to be controlling this. And he's saying, oh, by the way, everybody invite your grandparents and your parents to come over now. Well, we know
what kind of economic benefit is that?
That's going to pressure the healthcare system further. That's going to, all of our systems are housing the rest. But what it will do is make some of those new Canadians very happy. They're reunited with their family, and they're hoping, anyways, that a gratitude is going to be expressed at the ballot box. So I think there's very much a political element to it. I mean, the new Canadians coming over might not have citizenship in time to vote, but the families they're reuniting with will, and they want to keep that block. I mean, they were pretty blunt about that. I can't remember which minister it was or which Liberal it was when they were asked about why are you taking this particular stance on, again, one of the things in the Middle East. Just as well, how many Jews there are in my riding versus how many Muslims are in my riding. Yeah, so unfortunately, it ties very much into their electability and building the demographic they think they need to build to win.
Well, as you're saying, I mean, like now, Canada's foreign policy is not dictated by what is in the Canadian national interest. It is, and foreign policy in all democratic countries has to keep an eye on domestic opinion. But domestic opinion is changing with unrestricted mass migration from around the world. And that means even more so than in a normal country. Our foreign policy is dictated by, which diaspora population are we able to please or not aggravate, etc. Diaspora politics is in large, pretty much runs our foreign policy at this point. It has nothing to do at this point with what's in the national interest now.
I think that's a fair comment, and I think that's been going along for a long time. To your point about bringing in people who can be relied upon to vote Liberal, that is probably what the Liberals are thinking, because the Liberals like to work through community organizers. They talk to one person, and he goes out and tells the community, which doesn't speak English very well, these are the people you need to vote for. The Liberals like to do it that way. I mean, they can put these people in the
Conservatives play that game too. All parties do.
But, and here's the thing, during the Harper years, what we discovered was that a lot of immigrants come from socially conservative countries, the Philippines, Pakistan, India, and they're not coming here because they like the social policies that the Liberals are pushing. Well, that's very much the business of white atheists to promote those policies. If they vote Liberal, it's in spite of those policies, not because of them. What they're coming here for is a better life and the fact that they can bring their parents. So it's not quite as impenetrable as I had assumed before I went to Ottawa.
I mean, it's
and Jason Kenney did very well at what you're calling diaspora politics.
Well, there really was one election with the Harper majority in 2011, where they were successful in diaspora politics, at least in negating the Liberal advantage in it. But they had to do a lot for it. But that was kind of a one-off. In general, it does trend to progressivist, leftist parties. And I think, a big part is, they're relying on leftist identity politics, victim hierarchies, saying, okay, well, you might come from country XYZ, where you may have a more traditional view of the family unit, etc. But here in Canada, you're a victim, and here's, add up your different, here's your point system, add up your victim level, and therefore you belong with us. And I mean, it doesn't work on all, obviously. There's
not a way to sell French fries, isn't it?
Yeah, but it does work to a pretty extensive degree, especially beyond just the social policies. If people have a traditional view of family, etc. Diaspora politics is also money. We're going to give some money for you to help build XYZ cultural center for your people, and that has created a bidding war in all of the parties on the left and the right. The right does this too now because they have to politically to be competitive at all in many constituencies in Alberta and anywhere in Canada. To be competitive, you have to engage in this bidding war of diaspora politics. You got to show up and eat the food, do the dance, bow to the right thing.
It's a dangerous dance too, though. And we're starting to see that now that we're hitting a tipping point of such large segments of these populations. Diaspora, again, they're escaping those areas, but look at the Khalistani Hindu mess going on, and there are very large, significant, politically active populations on both sides of that issue, and it's very politically dangerous waters to wade into, and the Liberals have been good at kind of playing both sides, but it can blow up really badly on you with that.
It dictates our foreign politics, our foreign policy. Like our entire relationship with India has very little to do with what's in our national interest on trade, on security, etc. It has to do with diaspora politics between the Sikhs and the Hindus.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing.
Like, giving a cold shoulder to Modi. This is a massive trading partner for us. This is a great new developing market.
The Liberals have decided have come to the realization that within Canada, the Sikh voter base is significantly more important than the Hindu voter base. Therefore, you're going to take shots at Modi, who's a Hinduist, not perceived as that friendly towards the Sikhs.
And meanwhile, we lose out on potentially billions in trade. They're sacrificing our economic well-being for their bloody partisanship. I mean, it's.
Meanwhile, we don't actually know with any certainty how many immigrants we have in Canada and what their status is. How many have come in on a certificate?
No. We know how many have come in, but we have no idea if they're still here. There they are.
Once they're here, the honor system, when it's, your visa's up, we expect you just purchased a ticket and went home, right?
Yeah. I don't think many do.
No, it's not looking that way. And that's part of the problem when you have insular communities like that, actually, when it comes based on that, because that's how undocumented or people who aren't legal can manage to maintain within a country. Because if they stay in the tight community, you can find ways to keep working. I mean, it's complicated, but
so we've put this cap on, or Carney's put this cap on, which was still an extraordinarily high cap. And I mean, to be fair, Pierre Poilievre in the election called for a cap as well, lowering our cap. But it was still also extraordinarily high. Neither party seemed particularly interested, probably for reasons of diaspora politics, to get serious about controlling unrestricted mass migration.
Well, to be fair,
we've now missed even the cap.
There's one other area though, and there are elements of the business community, particularly say in the service area and such, where they wanted temporary foreign workers because they've been having a difficult time finding affordable local
big
labor.
business loves this.
And
It drives down the cost of labor, below levels that, otherwise lower income working class Canadians are willing to do. You're going to bring in people who are happy to work at that level, and it undercuts our lower working class.
And that's
So
another
big business loves it.
It's another aspect of the incentives for the Liberals to continue to talk big but do nothing when it comes to this.
There's more to be said on that subject. People say, well, they take the immigrants because the immigrants have a higher work ethic than, the Canadian-born kids, of whatever race they may come from. And there's some truth to that. However, there is also a very strong ethnic preference in hiring. So if you have somebody from this community who's got a business, he tends to look for people of his own kind for them to work. And it is resulting in Canadian young people born in Canada having much more difficulty in finding part-time work, summer jobs, and things like that, because the jobs are all going to like little hiring halls that are ethnically based.
Yeah.
So
and I can understand that. I mean, you're say new or relatively new to here. You establish a business, part of your social support network. Maybe there's government stuff, but no one cares about that. That's you're doing a favor to your friend. You hired his kid. You've now built you've put some mortar in between the bricks of your social structure there. It's holding that community together. And so that's a perfectly natural and normal thing
is understandable, and it's not helping the people who are already here who are supposed to be benefiting from immigration.
There is a wider thing with, I guess, spoiled Western work ethic, in my view. Like owning a pub, service industry, I would try to hire local kids, but boy, they don't show up on time. They don't care. I mean, not for everyone. There's exceptions, but I tell you, and when you start that route, and I started getting Filipino workers in my kitchen, they were fantastic. They would reach out to the community to find other people who wanted to work in there. They were never late. They didn't complain, and they were just made fantastic staff. So it's hard to, and this isn't a guy starting as a Filipino employer. That's just the way it worked. Mm-hmm. So whose fault is that?
Producer of our show's Filipino, and I'm convinced of their work ethic. The guy running the show right now, John Filipino, and arguably the hardest working guy here.
But either way, I just always get a laugh out of some of the people. They're coming to take our jobs. Well, did you apply for any of those jobs?
Where I want to know, I want to know is, where are the unions? Unions, which are supposed to, in theory, represent the interests of the organized labor working class. Now, most unions now tend to be the government sector, working in very often white-collar office jobs. But, even the private sector unions, where you're supposed to be able to go get a job, not have to necessarily have a bunch of post-secondary degrees to do it, and support the broader interests of the working class. The single, working class voters are voting more on the right now. Working class voters are very conscious of the problems around mass migration, but the union leaderships themselves are deafeningly silent on mass migration, which brings in people willing to work cheaper than someone who's maybe grown up in Canada, and undercuts their wages. It's the single biggest threat to the working class in Canada, and they're utterly silent.
I never thought I'd hear Derek saying, where the hell are the unions?
Well, the unions have changed. The unions have changed, though. I mean, it used to be the lunchbox carrying trade unions. Now it's the teachers' lounge unionists. It's they're the ones dominating the political class anyways. They've gone more into the woke politics. The Gil McGowans even aren't as big on the old school, we're going to stand up for the worker thing. They're tying themselves into woke causes instead. Yeah. I think that union block's still there, but nobody's speaking for them right now.
We need better unions. If we're going to have them. If we're going to have bloody unions, you get ones that at least speak to maybe the single biggest issue facing the working class.
I was going to actually ask Gil McGowan to call on the Hannaford show. What do you think about
that? Yeah. I mean, if it's in person, we'll probably have to bring security in for it.
Yeah. So I know he won't come at mine.
All right.
Actually, but you should invite them.
Why
I
not?
think that'd be great. I'd like to see what the union bosses have to say on these
This
issues.
issue, this will be the
Like,
question to ask.
probably disagree on everything, but
Yep.
they should theoretically agree with us on this.
Mhm.
This is, as we were saying, big business is the ones that like cheap, unrestricted mass migration. They get to completely flood out, the wage force. I mean, that's one of the reasons why unions like minimum wages applied even outside them. Is it sets a floor.
Yeah, it still pushes all the way.
It creates general pressure. That creates upward pressure. It still messes with the market. It's probably a bad idea, but at least it is technically upward pressure. Some people who aren't worth the minimum wage, well, then they just fall on social assistance. And you can argue about how good a trade-off that is or not. But okay. But this creates downward pressure on wages. Massive downward pressure. And people doing pretty well, they're not all that affected by it because it's at the lower levels where this pushes down.
Yeah, entry levels and the
entry-level jobs, low skill, that kind of thing.
The ones are going to lose out to artificial intelligence. What?
Artificial intelligence is going to kill upper-class jobs.
yeah, it's just artificial intelligence won't unplug my toilet.
Yeah.
Well, yet.
Skills,
I mean, you see how good those
blue-collar
numbers-
skilled
numbers
labor
are
are the only
getting,
people with jobs going to be left with jobs soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the wildfires in Nova Scotia. So this has got everyone on both sides in a tizzy. I saw was it Steve Marr? No, was it Steve Marr? The Globe and Mail columnist.
Yeah.
Steve Marr. Yeah. You've seen him kind of defending this. I'm not going to explain the situation itself. Everyone knows about it. But, he was defending it, saying, well, most of the critics of this, they're all coming from points west, as he put it. These Westerners, I don't think he actually put it very rudely. I don't think he's actually incorrect when he says it's, these Westerners are more libertarian and, and I don't like it when Easterners pipe in about how we're doing our business. So, okay, it goes both ways. I get it. But he's saying, we're more communitarian out here. I take issue with that. I think actually, in many ways, we're more communitarian. We just rely less on the state to do it. I cooperate. I'm building stuff around my property with my neighbors, doing things that are kind of almost quasi-municipal, but we don't bother asking government. We just come together, pool our resources, pool our labor, do it ourselves. Or communitarian, just on a more private, voluntary level. But okay, I guess what he's saying is the more communitarian maybe on the state level, state enforcing it. So if, and everyone's admitted, including the government officials, that yes, walking in the forest or going fishing isn't going to create a fire, but some other people will go there and do some dumb things, so we have to do this. And I'm willing to actually grant the theoretical possibility they could be correct. In an emergency, rights do get curtailed. All governments do is curtail rights, and sometimes that can be justified. But I'd say after the last decade we've had, there's very little reservoir of goodwill that we trust the government to know where to draw the line in the curtailment of rights in an emergency. We went through COVID where rights were stripped away without any evidence, or often in the face of contrary evidence, where people were legitimately oppressed and discriminated against for no discernible actual public good outcomes. So yeah, we don't have a very big reserve of goodwill to trust the state on these things. Okay, so that's the argument going on there. But what really just made this chef's kiss for me was when the Nova Scotia government created an exemption for First Nations. So, going for a hike in the forest, going fishing, these things could inadvertently start a forest fire. But if you happen to belong to a First Nation, then the risk might not be so great. I don't know. Is this the difference? I'm going to get in trouble on this one. Is this the difference between an Indian fire and a white plant fire?
I don't know where to go with the answer with that one. But I mean, they're inviting this kind of discussion because the absurdity of this. They're just getting so bold and blatant and showing that this has absolutely nothing to do with the fire risk.
Like, what's it about?
Yeah.
What is it about then? I don't understand, because it's clearly not a fire risk. About fire risk.
It's control. I mean, I brought many safety guys to tears during my 20 years in the oil field. As you know,
You were the safety guy?
No, I was the surveyor who defied the safety guy, who
okay. Everyone hates the
fought
safety
with
guy.
the safety guy who
Okay.
would battle with him. I like smart safety policies. I like to see the guy who shows up in his pickup truck drunk fired. I like to see the guy who's blasting down the cut line on a quad with no helmet on and jumping off the stumps disciplined. I don't like the twits and morons, though, who start imposing stuff where there really wasn't a risk to begin with. Like, for example, they started with ATV bans in the woods and things like that, chainsaws. Okay, those are hot items that could start a fire, and there could be a problem. No problem. But when you start to ban hikers, that safety guy's gone wild, where they just go to the length of the absurd. And then it also shows that they tend to be also the ones who are woke to the max as well. Well, oh dear, we've got a First Nations play that's coming up, and they're going to be very upset if we cancel this. If it had been any other play, or heaven forbid, a Christian singer.
It is Shakespeare, actually.
Yes,
That's a separate it was an indigenous interpretation of Shakespeare, which I think is cultural appropriation.
It is, and
In the extreme.
which I think most of us don't mind or care, but it is. The irony is hilarious, though. And they're just scared of canceling that to upset them. It's that bizarre double standard. There's no race less likely to light a fire than another. Or if we wanted to dig down into some stats, we might find some stuff they really don't want to find out.
Oh, we're going to have to cap our spiciness right there.
Yeah. But it's just bureaucrats gone wild, and they've got the authority. They enjoy using it, and it's ridiculous. And I'm glad this happened with this, because it exposed just how stupid it is.
There's one more thing about that story. There is now a snitch line.
Oh, yes.
Now, snitch line, that takes us back to COVID.
Yep.
And
We have Bernanke's here. And
to your point about control, there is the thing that locks that into place. It's when governments don't have any imagination, then they start restricting people. It's simplistic. They won't do the hard work of enforcement, and it is hard work. Yeah, but they want you to become a partner with them in enforcement. It's not the way to build a society. I'm just amazed that people will even tolerate it for a moment.
Well, and real safety is difficult, but bans are easy.
Yeah.
You know, but it's funny. Most often, at least, we could do a bit of a cost benefit. I mean, how many children die in swimming pools every year across the country? A handful.
Mhm.
If we wanted to reduce it to zero, there's only one way. You'd have to ban every swimming pool.
you make reasonable mitigations like lifeguards,
Fencing around the pools, training, lots of things.
trade-offs.
But we have accepted that as it sits right now, a number of children are going to die in those swimming pools. To be honest, I won't be shocked if it gets to a point where they start banning the bloody things. If you're going to ban people from walking in the woods, because that's the only way they think they can reduce the human ability to light a fire to zero, as ridiculous as that sounded 10 years ago, today apparently it's just a shrug of the shoulders.
Well, I mean, it'd be the same with the only way to eliminate auto accidents is to ban
cars. Yeah.
We've decided that is not reasonable. Now, there's things we can do to mitigate things, but people are still dying every single day in auto crashes. I think this kind of government overreach actually creates danger. You know, I remember saying during COVID that I hope to God we don't actually get the big one. Like if we got a real, like one of these movies where it's like it's the Black Death, and it's a genuine crisis. I mean, a restriction of your freedoms can, in some circumstances, be justified if the trade-offs are appropriate, if you're not going intentionally too far. There is a circumstance under which lockdowns could make sense, theoretically. But the abuse of government power by virtually nearly every government around the world, and especially in Canada, during COVID, made sure that it destroyed our trust in institutions. It destroyed social trust to the point where if we got the big one, if we got Black Plague coming. So many people, if it happens within, I think, 15 years of COVID here, people are going to say, You got us last time.
Yeah, we've been through this. I'm not going.
Yes. Yeah. People will not follow reasonable recommendations or reasonable restrictions. You do have to curtail some activities during a forest for high risk of forest fire. Like I ride my quad every single day around my own land here. But if we were under a fire watch, I understand that, okay, maybe that could create a grass fire on my land.
Yeah, you got a manifold outside, tall, dry grass. Okay, well, wait.
It can happen. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens. That would be a reasonable restriction. But if the government's if the government's going around banning me from hiking or fishing, clearly things that have no impact whatsoever, I'm less likely to trust the more reasonable restriction that, hey, right now, you probably shouldn't ride your quad because it could cause a spark.
Well, the measles resurgence, I'm blaming to a degree total overplay of the COVID vaccines when they got in people's faces. They caused distrust. Mm-hmm. We had everybody, a tipping point of people taking up the measles vaccine for decades, and we've virtually eliminated. And suddenly now there's people who are saying, I don't trust vaccines for measles, and I'm not going to have my children vaccinated. Look what happened. Now we're seeing measles popping up on the scene again. Yeah. That was the fault of them breaking the trust with COVID.
Yeah, it's as old as history itself. The governments always try to gather power, and it's the sort of the unique achievement of the governments of the Anglosphere in the last couple of 100 years, inspired by liberty-minded philosophers who actually step back and say, no, people should be free to do what people can do safely. But now we're seeing the kind of overreach you're seeing in Nova Scotia and in New Brunswick and in Newfoundland, and people have lost confidence in the old liberty idea, and they say, yeah, sure, here's my wrist, put the handcuffs on, just make me safe. You have written in the past, Cory Morgan, that there's a war on motor cars. That the secret plan is to have a lot less motor cars and people to be a lot less mobile. Keep them in 15-minute seats, and if they have to go somewhere, let them rent a golf cart.
Well, or if it's public transit, and then boy, it's much easier to kind of...
Yeah, but then you kind of got people literally where you want them.
Yes.
And I would make this proposition to you, and it sort of relates back to the forests. The ability to go where you go is the true definition of freedom. It's more important than having a vote. If you can go where you want to go, and you don't have to get your sign off or a permit from a government department first, that's freedom. Absolutely. They don't like that.
Yeah, it's and this can lead us to seeing conspiracies, and sometimes we'll see them because they are there, but it'll also lead us to see things that are not there because our trust in institutions, our formerly high trust society, is no longer a high trust society, and so we've lost, and this might rub off on otherwise institutions that otherwise still actually do a good job. I generally trust my doctor, but I'm probably just naturally more suspicious of, the medical institutions in general because they threw their lot in and got political. You can't trust some wings of even the scientific community now because they've made themselves explicitly political, be it on global warming, on vaccines, but this is going to rub off then on people who have not violated our trust.
So to your point about the scientists, many fit the description that you've given them. But here is another illustration of where the central government moves in and creates the opinions that it wants, because scientists need money to do research. They don't much care what the research is, but they do need the money. That's what pays the bill. So the government sets up the guidelines for giving grants that you have to think certain things. So try and prove the point, try and get a grant as a climate scientist that says, no, all this stuff about global warming is way, way overrated. You will not get the grant. It just won't happen. But if you take the other view, then you will. Have a much better chance anyway. So again, yes, some of our friends have let us down, but you can see why, and it's at the behest of the government. So just giving a pat on the back to the honest scientist.
Yep. Okay. Well, we'll switch gears a little here. Cory, I'll let you set it up. But Maxime Bernier did a live stream the other day. We covered it. As both of us, as people who have led small fringy parties before, both on the independence issue, we both, I think, are particularly well positioned to be able to speak to this. Small parties have to do bold, sometimes even outrageous things to get attention, to get some traction. But the People's Party of Canada, a populist, right-wing, but ostensibly still Canadian nationalist and federalist party, has now endorsed the yes side of the likely still coming referendum at some point on Alberta independence. Curious.
Well, speaking of putting party interest ahead of national interest, here's a fine example of it on a more micro level, I think. I mean, the PPC under Maxime Bernier sort of has a base of support that's very small. It hasn't grown, but it hasn't really shrunk either.
It's shrunk from the high point they had in COVID.
Oh, yes, from back then. I'm just speaking more in the last couple of years. But they need money. They need a degree of support. And I'm only guessing, but I would bet a bulk of their supporters are concentrated in Alberta. And of all parties where the bulk of the supporters would be independence-minded supporters, his Alberta members are probably 90% independent support.
I would imagine, yeah.
He needs donors. He wants to keep them happy. Let's put that out there because it is counterintuitive to a federal party. I mean, he did put out other things talking about reducing, federal incursions into provincial jurisdiction and other policy moves. But to be an ostensibly federal party to say that you support the dissolution of the federation through a vote in another province, it's just bizarre. I mean, seeing the Bloc do.
We'll take all the help we can get.
Oh, sure. I mean, we sort of been saying it for quite some time. But I mean, I think his motivations are just purely driven on trying to keep that base inflamed and happy and donating. I mean, is he going to gain any of his support in Ontario or Quebec or anywhere else? But he's not looking there. He's just looking to pay the bills.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. But, he could use this excuse if he wanted to. Let's get a strong pro-independence vote in Alberta, and then we can maybe extract a better deal out of the federal government, which I still support.
That is what he's argued here. And he said, like in the 1995 Quebec referendum on independence, he voted yes because he felt that, after Charlottetown and Meech Lake, things have been frozen. The ambitions of Quebec nationalists had been thwarted. That was the only way to obtain reform. I think most people who voted for independence in the Quebec, well, actually, whatever they were voting on was a convoluted question. But most people voted yes, I should say, voted for independence. But a sizable minority of them wanted to push to use this as a gun to the head of Canada to obtain reforms. But I mean, if we got a yes vote on independence in Alberta, like our proposed question is not ambiguous. It's not the Quebec one where it's, what does yes mean? What's
salad,
yeah. It's not ambiguous. It's clear. If we get a yes vote, we expect independence. The time for reform is before that vote. It's not after that vote. After that vote, the only discussion needs to be, okay, I'll take the kids Monday to Friday. You take them on the weekend, and you get the house, I get the car. That's the discussion.
Who gets Quebec?
Well, they get Quebec.
You can have it.
And we're not paying child support anymore. This is about ending child support.
Yeah.
So I get what he's saying, but perhaps he's approaching this from the view of a Quebecer, of at least many Quebecers who saw a yes vote for independence in Quebec as a way of extracting more from the federal government, getting more decentralization in the kind that they want, or an asymmetrical deal, etc. Many Quebecers do view the independence movement as a way to do that. And I'm sure some Albertans do, but not many.
Something Ted Byfield mentioned a couple of times. I remember back when I was leading the AIP too, though, it was refederation. And it was more along the premise almost, though, that, yeah, I guess if the Federation fell apart, we could redraft it with a new contract. And a province leaving could be the catalyst that leads to that. So the negotiations begin, but now we're beginning the negotiations as independent nations, and we're going to try to come together under a new agreement.
Well, I've argued before, like sometimes I've asked people the question rhetorically: if Alberta was an independent country right now, would we join Canada?
Under
these terms?
Yeah.
No one would ever, even the most hardcore Federalists, they have to admit, no, I probably would not. But, Alberta independence is tied up with the other question of broader Western independence. If Alberta went, there's a very good chance Saskatchewan would follow, probably start a domino effect. Quebec is then gone because Quebec would have to pay into Canada. They'll never do that. And that means at that point, then BC, maybe Manitoba and territories come along. And then it raises the question, would Canada just be refounded under the new constitution? Because I fundamentally, I didn't grow up not liking Canada. I grew up as a passionate Canadian nationalist. And if it was possible to save Canada, that would be my preference. I think it's the preference of most, even hardline Alberta nationalists. I no longer want to be outvoted by the East all the time because they have crazy ideas. I think we just have very separate conceptions of the role of government, how we want to govern ourselves. But yeah, so I think that's kind of what Bernier is arguing, not to actually recreate the country again, but that it would create a political circumstance, political facts on the ground that would lead to broader reform of Canada. Fine, but that's not what would happen if we got a yes vote. If we got a yes vote, it's done.
Yeah. Or at least then that's pulled the string on the sweater that made it unravel. And, whatever happens after that, I think if any one province leaves the federation's done. Whether it's Quebec or Alberta or Saskatchewan.
No. I think Quebec could leave and everything. Our reason for leaving would more or less go away. Not entirely, but we could then probably reform the Constitution. We could probably make Canada work without Quebec.
Well, perhaps. I mean,
leaving would strengthen
that chunk. The problem with Quebec is we're going down a rabbit hole, but it is the geographic problem.
They have an interest
when you
free trade,
but the country such where the Maritimes are suddenly isolated, and then we got some other issues to deal with.
Yeah, but they're not exactly going to be a Danzig corridor. Like, I doubt they're going to arm it.
No,
to stop us from rolling through.
And if he's rowing up from the
and if he's coming from East Prussia. Yeah. No, I think it would be in everyone's interest if Quebec left. Like, Quebec needs to trade with Canada. I think we'd probably come to some kind of anything other than pipelines we could probably get through.
Yeah.
Actually, we might have more leverage to get pipelines through Quebec at that point.
You won't hear an argument out of me. I mean, we're pushing to the converted on this in general.
Yeah. Yeah, the question is whether we should even waste much time talking about the People's Party. I mean, a lot of people like Bernier. He's charming as all get out, charm the wallpaper off the walls, but nobody's voting for him. What was it, less than 1% in the federal election?
Yeah, I mean, they had their high point
during COVID.
Because there was a very real reason for it. They were the only party not in on vaccine passports, and like Aaron O'Toole ran on pro-vaccine passport, pro-carbon tax, all of these things. There was a real purpose for the PPC then. Polyev largely changed that, but I think the big risk for the Federal Conservative Party now is on immigration, and their language is getting tougher on it. But I think people are, I think the Canadian public in general, and conservative voters in particular, are well to the right of the Conservative Party on immigration right now. I think if the PPC is to get traction on any major issue and try to have some life come back into it, it's going to be on that.
It could be one for them to own, yeah.
Okay, well, let's put a pin in it and go to our parting shots. Start with Cory today.
Sure, the Toronto International Film Festival, and it's a big one. It's worldwide known with all those movies coming out, but they had a documentary that documented an Israeli man saving his family from Hamas on October 7th. And they've booted that documentary from the festival, of course. They won't show it. But the weakness of their excuse in kicking that out is that it used a bunch of the footage that Hamas had taken, with their body cams while they were on their orgy of murder and rape. And the documentarian hadn't gotten permission from Hamas to use the footage.
Oh, so it was copyright.
Yeah. I wish I was making this up.
You got to be. I didn't see that.
So that's what their excuse has been. So, I mean, we know the reality. They didn't want to show an Israel sympathetic documentary, but that was the best excuse they could find for kicking it out, is the terrorist group didn't give us permission to use the footage they took while they were committing terrorism and shared on social media.
Well, at least they didn't say it was a safety issue.
No, good. Fair enough. So they changed the narrative.
That That is gloriously
Canadian.
gloriously Canadian. They didn't get copyright from Hamas.
Yeah.
I'll top that.
Well, I can't. I mean, that's I salute you. You dug that one. I brought it forward. I did think, though, it was very significant what Parks Canada did this week. A couple of weeks ago, they kicked Sean Foote, the American Christian rocker, off a Parks Canada site, saying that he didn't conform to their values. They had values, and wasn't that nice? Well, yesterday, I think it was, there was the unveiling of a plaque in a Manitoba residential school. And Parks Canada, in pursuit of its values, has been very strong on saying, residential school system was cultural genocide. And they would put that on the plaques when they were designating some of these schools as historic sites. Mm-hmm. Well, let's just say that they really do have values. What are we to make of the fact that on this one, there was no reference to cultural genocide? Is Parks Canada, which takes its marching orders directly from the federal government, starting to take a more moderate view of what the residential school were about? Could it be anything to do with the fact that Mr. Carney's father actually ran a residential school in the Northwest?
And there is no evidence that he was a genocidal man.
No.
There's no evidence.
And was a very reputable public administrator. I love the idea that maybe some truth will start sneaking back into that story.
Here's to hoping.
But Parks Canada, whoa.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to give tip of the hat, wag of the finger here for China. China, not a state which I'm normally sympathetic with, but they did what you would naturally expect. There was already a big tariff on Canadian canola in retaliation for Canadian tariffs against Chinese-made electric vehicles. This was designed to artificially prop up Ontario's mega subsidized EV industry and get it going.
Kind of like what Trump's doing for the American auto industry.
Yes. But ever since Trump pulled the EV mandates and subsidies in the States, it has pretty much flatlined the whole industry because very few people actually want EVs unless you have a small little drives around a city or something. Maybe then. But for huge portions of people who live in a place like North America, it's wildly impractical, especially in Canada where it's cold. Batteries don't do too well. The whole industry is cratering anyway. The Liberals have stood by their EV tariffs on Chinese vehicles, and the Chinese have just increased by 76, 78%.
76, yeah.
76% on top of the 100% that was already there against Canadian canola. So, and who does that primarily affect? I don't think EV manufacturers in Ontario are also in the canola business. It affects primarily Western farmers in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, who have one of the biggest market in the world, effectively completely closed to them now. And that's all done to prop up Ontario's, I can't even say zombie, because zombie implies was actually alive at some point. It's never been alive. It never will be alive. Propping up Ontario's Frankenstein. That's probably a better analogy. Frankenstein EV industry. So I'm just glad that we could do our part for Ontario's subsidized EV industry.
Quite so.
We're just doing our part for the country, because we never do.
Rah.
All right, Cory, Nigel, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.
Hopefully we have Erica back next week. I thank all of you for joining us today on The Pipeline. Remember, we are supported by people like you. We, to keep doing the work we're doing as Western Canada's largest independent media outlet, we need you to support us by becoming a member. Go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access to all Western Standard content, getting past the paywall, and supporting the work that we do. Thank you very much for joining us today. God bless.